Perhaps the most interesting of the new effects introduced in CS4 is the cartoon effect. What this does is take your live action footage and make it look like it was filled by hand with color. Now there have been other cartoon style effects from others in the past. What makes this one different is, well, one, it's free, After Effects CS4, and it's accelerated by the GPU, the video card inside your computer, so it's rather snappy. So let's try it out. I'll select my footage and apply Effect, Stylize, Cartoon. The first parameter I play around with is Fill Shading Steps, and I reduce it to get a good color combination or color balance in the image. For me, the sweet spot's between 2 and 3. That's where I get these really bright colors that I personally like. The second parameter I like to adjust are the edge threshold and width. That reduces the prominence of these black lines around the face and other edges in the image. By reducing the threshold, you can see we reduce the number of lines in the image, and we can also play around with how thin or thick those lines are. So now we have an image that's a bit more pleasing on the eye. The third set of parameters I go after are the detail radius and the detail threshold. That decides how realistic or how flat shaded this looks. If I go to some extremes, you can see I get a very flat shaded look, very smoothed out, almost surreal looking. Somewhere in between where I can decide how much detail I've got, particularly in the face and in the line, gives me more of a look that I'm after. And again, this is very iterative. You can go back after shading steps and control just what sort of color and breakdown you have in here. Maybe a different look right in that area. And then shading smoothness, whether or not you want this very highly detailed look or something that has just a little bit of detail, a little bit smoother of a look like that. Now I mentioned edges earlier, and this is an area that you can refine further by twirling down the advanced section of this plugin. Here you can go ahead and play around with the edge black level, the edge contrast, and really tweak this out a bit more to get more of the look that you're after. Let's move on to a second example, and I'll show you some corrective things you may need to do with Cartoon. Here's another live video. I'll select the footage and apply Effect, Cartoon. Remember, the most recently applied effect is always at the top of the effect menu. And you'll see, again, we have the black lines and a lot of darkness in the background, and I'll scrub through here to see how this looks. Now I can make my same adjustments in terms of shading steps, edge threshold, but you see overall the image is very dark looking. Well, don't be afraid to pre-process the image before you apply a cartoon. In this case, apply Effect, Color Correction, Levels, place levels before cartoon, and play around with the gamma and the white point to go ahead and change what sort of colors are being shoved into cartoon in the first place. By pulling down the input white to right where the activity starts in the image, I already have a more balanced final result. And again, I can play with gamma just to tweak what range of colors cartoon is going to give me in the end. And now I've got something that's rendered much more like a pastel than my original result without the levels effect, before and after. So don't be afraid to pre-process your footage before playing around with cartoon. Now the one other thing I'll point out is you may notice that there's some brightness going on around the edges of this image. That's an artifact of cartoon's processing hitting the very edge of your frame. If you're going to do this for web video, you might want to take your image and scale it up very slightly just to get those edges cropped off by the edge of your composition, and so you won't see them on web video. I'm going to go back to my first example. I'm going to go ahead and reset cartoon and say, well, what if I'm not feeling particularly inspired today? Or what if I'm having trouble getting a good look out of cartoon? Well, don't forget in the After Effects CS3, they introduced this function called Brainstorm. And what Brainstorm does is give you several variations on your selected effect or selected parameters. And if you want to really play around, you can go ahead and increase the randomness and keep brainstorming until you get different looks. Like this is a really interesting posterized look. I'll hit Brainstorm again and keep getting these different variations. If I see something I like these posterized looks, I can say Include in the next Brainstorm, and continue from there and get variations on that theme. This is a particularly interesting one as well. If you see something you like, go ahead and do Save as New Composition. It will save it off to its own brand new comp, and then you can continue to brainstorm and look for other alternatives. Now the last tip I'll give you about cartoon is it doesn't look quite right on live action footage. That's because the frame rate is too high. It's too realistic. Go into your composition settings and play around with lower frame rates, such as 15 or even 12 frames a second, to get motion that's more in line with what a cartoon should look like. So hopefully that'll give you some ideas about how to use the cartoon effect.